Welcome to episode 184 of the Confidence Through Health podcast. In this episode, I speak with Kim Askey Strasser. She is the Senior Vice President of Coaching and Curriculum at MetaBrain Labs. She works specifically with MetaBrain's self product that they have. And we talk about mindset because that's what they're helping with. They're using technology to help people improve their mindset. And why would they want to do that? Because as anyone in the coaching space knows, anyone in the self-development space knows, improving your mindset improves your life. It's the power of positive thinking. But one of the problems is, and what they're using technology for is determining where is the issue, where is the disconnect between your unconscious, your thought patterns, and what you're actually achieving in your life and what you actually think is achievable in your life. And everybody's different, and everybody has different needs and different wants and different goals. And everybody has a different level of what they determine success to be. But what they're doing and what we talk about is the importance of that mindset shift, the importance of understanding why you think the way you do, and how do we unlock the unconscious thoughts that we have so that we can change them and change those negative loops that we're on, change those negative behaviors that come because of those negative loops. And so it's a great conversation. I think it's for somebody that is stuck, this could be transformational. The information that Kim gives and the work that they're doing, I can see it making massive changes in people's lives for the better. And I think that's what we need. And that's my goal, is to help people get better. And so if you're the person out there that's needing a little bit of help, hopefully this will help you get over some of those negative thoughts that you have, because in reality, you are enough, you are loved, you are cared for. You need to feel that way internally just as much as you do on the external. So welcome, Kim, to the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jerry.
So I'm really excited to get into what you're working with in mindset, in like how, AI and how other things are getting into, like, how can we get into more of our subconscious and accessing more of what we've got. But before we get into all that, like, tell us how you got involved in it. Like what struck you and went like, ooh, I've got to go into this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I am a certified life coach. I'm a master life coach, and I've been focusing on health and wellness for several years. In my previous life, I was a nurse, and that sort of led me down the path of, we do so much to rescue and to intervene, and we're so behind the eight ball when we get to that point, that I've always been really curious and passionate about how do we sort of get further back, get closer to the root of these issues to prevent more. And I'm sure you've heard this and you probably say it, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure every day of the week. And so that's really probably where my passion comes from. And I've done life coaching for wellness and weight loss for women, specifically, in our late 30s into 40s and 50s, as our bodies change, how to be, one, mindful about what those changes need to be to continue to optimize your health, but two, patient and compassionate with yourself as we do change. There are some physical changes that just impact that what we did in our 20s doesn't work as well in our 30s and 40s. And that's been my work for several years. And it's extremely successful when you marry mindset with action, which I know and sort of, speak to your audience frequently as well. The thing that drew me to this product specifically and working with MetaBrain Labs and shifting my business into a technology-focused mindset shifting work is really the efficiency and the reach. So bringing the technology together, it's not unlike anything else we geek out about. We love our Apple Watches, we love our Garmins, we love the data to support that what we're doing is making a difference. Well, this product is the path to get that to our unconscious, to our mindset, to actually understand if we're getting to the root of what is blocking us or really what is optimizing our performance.
Mhm.
And to my knowledge, if the technology is out there, no one's using it quite this way
Right.
to help someone understand themselves in such an intimate way to actually make meaningful changes. And I think the best example is like you think you've made changes, but then you just feel stuck. Like you
Yeah.
kind of have the same problem over and over. And I think that's what draws me to this work is you really can't hide from it. The technology and the data, it's there, just like your biometric data, right? And
Right.
so it's just another avenue for that. And I think it's exactly what I want. And I think it's kind of what our next path of wellness and marrying together modern age, modern technology, modern science with optimizing our health and wellness. I just think it's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and you said something there that like you understanding ourselves, like at that deeper level, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
in whatever you label, whatever your issue is, whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever, fear of failure
Yep.
or whatever those things are that like, okay, I know I have this issue, whether it's health related or work related or relationship related, you're always sabotaging your relationships or whatever it is.
Yep.
Like having that outside piece, meaning the technology piece that can come in and help us get to like that true understanding of, oh, that's what I'm doing to myself.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
self-sabotaging piece. Is that what the like the purpose of it, the thinking behind creating it was for?
It is. So the thinking behind it is that if you and I are having a coaching conversation or anyone, when we talk about, oh, this is my issue, I know I have fear factor, I have imposter syndrome. Like notice even in the way that I say that, it almost sounds like a truth, like a personality
Right.
trait, and we attach to it.
Yeah.
Not only do we attach to it, but we sort of stop there. And if we're talking about this, really, it's just our best guess. It'd be like me trying to say to you, I bet your blood pressure is somewhere around 105 over 75.
Mhm.
You look calm, you look
Right.
relaxed. Like
Right.
it's a best guess. And that's the
Yeah.
same in a coaching environment. Like, I think what I'm hearing is you probably have a bit of imposter syndrome. And you're
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, that is it. But notice how when we attach to that, maybe you have some compassion and you're working with it almost like a crutch.
Yeah.
You work with
Yep.
this issue rather than overcoming it. So the technology really allows us to be twofold. One, validate that is actually true for you. And the way
Mhm.
it does it is it's almost like a reverse lie detector. It can tell if you believe what you're saying and it
Oh, wow.
validates that for you so you can see it. Because you might ask this, it's a chatbot paired with
Mhm.
EEG technology. So you wear a little headband and it
Okay.
monitors for you.
Right.
And you might think it's imposter syndrome, but your deep subconscious, your unconscious doesn't actually believe that. So it uncovers something new. But uncovering it is just step one. The
Yeah.
real magic is rewiring yourself. So
Mhm.
a lot of as I've kind of explored what else is out there, a lot of this kind of technology is being used to understand that and almost just accept that this is who I am. I am someone with imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Well, I don't believe that we have to stick with those kinds of personality traits or
Right.
labels. Um, and I don't think that actually serves us to get to our next level. So the process then and why coaching is so helpful, this has allowed me as a coach to say, well, let's get to the root of that. And we don't have to waste so much time getting to the root. We can spend our time together rewiring the way you think about yourself to get you to be someone who isn't held back with imposter syndrome anymore,
Right.
as an example.
Right. And it's I can hear people saying like, okay, well, what about just meditation? Like, can't you just get
Yeah,
to a really deep meditation and find all these things? And because I know I've heard people that can do that,
you can.
but
Yeah.
it like you could do both. But with the meditation, I also heard you say like you don't really there's not really that validation piece because you could be leaning into that as your own identity, saying, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you lean into it, you kind of accept it, you start to familiarize and connect with some of these belief patterns about yourself.
Right.
And you can, so I kind of have a couple ways that I think about that. I love meditation. I'm a yogi. I teach yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I live for that, right?
Right.
But I'm a pretty zen, calm person when I'm on my mat. And,
Right.
then you come home and maybe the kitchen is a mess, or
Life
there's
hits you.
shoes
Yeah.
everywhere, or life hits you, right?
Yeah.
Something unexpected hits you.
Yeah.
And then you're triggered and you're
Right.
emotionally experiencing life because we are humans.
Yeah.
That reaction is coming from a deep unconscious is the better word to use,
Mm-hmm.
a deep unconscious belief about yourself in that situation. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that we can rewire, right? If you're good at meditation, maybe you can connect with these belief patterns about yourself. But what about when they show up in your daily life? That's really what I think this is beneficial for. Yes, tied to a goal, right? So
Right.
I think helpful. We tend to be problem focused beings. And so we all have goals, whether it's to
Right.
run, finish a triathlon or lose weight or be more patient. You
Yeah.
can connect in meditation with what that underlying unconscious belief pattern might be. But then what, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge it only takes you so far. So that's the process that we've built is we help uncover the knowledge, but then also the process of rewriting that
Mm-hmm.
into a way that makes you more of who you want to be, enjoy
Yeah.
your life more, and kind of create and achieve more of what you want to do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And like I'm sure you've heard these stories of, somebody who gets diagnosed with cancer or, they have something show up on an X-ray and they're just like, oh my gosh, this is, doctors are just like in 3 months or 6 months later, they go in for a follow-up and it's like, it's all gone,
Mm-hmm.
and they ask them, like, what did you do? And they're like, I just don't believe I'm that person.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've
I
heard that
mean,
story. And it's, so is that basically what they were doing, is tapping into that unconscious of, I'm not going to believe that. And so I'm going to tell my body to get rid of that and fix it. And we're going to move on the other way.
that's a great question. I would guess yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to pretend to say that
Right.
I believe that we can reverse, cancer with mindset techniques by themselves. But when you put it all together, I think the way I interpret that, being a healthcare professional and a mindfulness expert, is that it all goes together.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's absolutely no harm in deciding to believe differently about your ability to be healthy despite the diagnosis that's in front of you,
Right.
right? But also use all the things that are available. I'm
Right.
not wanting that anyone not get their treatment and just
Sure.
go to a retreat to try to get better, but it absolutely helps. And the reason that I know it helps is the number one cause of cancer and heart disease and all of these chronic illnesses that we're dealing with is stress. And stress is
Mm-hmm.
caused by the way that we think about
Yeah.
ourselves and our lives and living
Right.
in our lives. And so that's where a lot of this can be extremely powerful. Again, I like to think of it as prevention rather than rescue, but those
Mm-hmm.
are such amazing and inspiring examples of what if that is just how it works.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and when it comes to mindset too, it's we've all heard the, you are what you eat. And
mhm,
more recently, in the last couple of years, it's come out to, like, you are what you consume. Not
mhm.
just food, but media, and what are you spending your time reading and researching, and and from that standpoint, the mindset of, do you want to have a positive mindset, or are you digging into all those negative things? Because at the unconscious level, and I'm assuming you can see this in the data of the people that you've worked with, at the unconscious level, that like gets magnified.
Mhm. It is magnified at the unconscious level. And so one place that I tend to start with my clients is tell me the three emotions you feel on a regular basis. And they're
Mm-hmm.
almost always negative. And it's not a problem. That's how our brains are hardwired, which I know
Right.
we lean to the negative. We have a
Right.
negativity bias meant to keep
Yep.
us safe, right?
Yep.
So I love shifting from negative to positive. It feels way better and you get more of what you want in your
Mm-hmm.
life. that being said, not all negative thinking is bad. And I
Yeah.
think I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased the question so I answer it right. But this idea of negative thoughts floating through our mind all the time, I think it's just a matter of understanding what they are and taking responsibility for them, because we get
Mm,
to decide what we think on a
yeah.
regular basis. And I think that's something that most of us weren't taught. And when you think about, oh, it was the inputs, that's what you said. So yes,
Hmm.
we are what we consume. Absolutely. And the more you the more you think something repeatedly, the more true it becomes for you. So you also are what you choose to focus on, and what you focus on grows. So if you have sort of this running loop of negativity in your mind, you are just going to see more of it.
Hmm.
And it does require effort to shift ourselves out of that.
Yeah.
So what we do is we acknowledge the unhelpful loop that exists, that maybe at its root, most of us have something that says, I'm not good enough, I'm not
Hmm.
worthy, I'm unlovable,
Right.
something like that. And we learn to, our practice is first uncovering that and then releasing it. And we've all heard this, like, just let those go. But
Right.
what does that even mean? Because if they've been on repeat for a long time,
Right.
you actually have to repeat letting them go, which sounds something like, I no longer feel or I no longer believe that I am not enough,
Yeah.
right? And then replace it with something that you want to. And the technology helps us to decide, is this new belief pattern true to me? Like, do I believe it enough to work on it? And so then
Hmm.
they layer, right? Because
Right.
I probably can't go from I'm not enough to I'm inherently worthy and I love myself 100% of the time. Like, that just might not feel true, but we could start to climb a ladder towards that. And the
Right.
technology helps us to know which, you know, quote unquote affirmation might be the right one to try on for now. And when you do it a couple of times a day for 2 weeks, you are changing what you're consuming
Hmm.
on purpose. And so it's not just about blindly, I love listening to people like you and any podcast, and I will put, the right inputs into my head, but it's not
Yeah.
always specifically tailored to what I'm trying to achieve. And that's
Right.
what's different here is we get to specifically tailor, this is what I want to think about myself and this situation. And the more you focus on it, then the more it grows with that intention, which I find to be really powerful and freeing as
Hmm.
an individual.
So is it more being individual and being directed? Is it more of a like, because I would assume that if somebody is at a spot where they're like, I'm going to go, because everybody's looking at AI going, okay, this stuff's new. How are
Yep.
we, like some people are super scared about it. And
Yep.
so it's still cutting edge. It's still something that people are like, okay, dip my toe into this and go see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that people, like a lot of other things, is that like, okay, I'm just desperate. I need some help, which means typically I've got a lot of issues, not just one or two.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
does it identify like, okay, this is the deeper issue, or is it more set towards like, okay, well, this is your goal that you're identifying. Let's start moving you that direction. Then we'll start also attaching and attacking those other issues too.
I would say it's the latter. So we're very cautious about how we use AI with this technology because we are, you know, it is very influential when we're
Hmm.
thinking about mindset and all of that. The way that we use AI is about exploration. It's
Okay.
not about giving. So we're not influencing our clients with affirmations. They're writing them themselves. What the
Gotcha.
AI technology does is it helps to have a conversation. So it's basically a chat discussion on your phone while you're wearing the EEG headset that allows you, it asks you questions and then you're validating it with the
Okay.
technology. The AI is really just formulating the questions based on sort of replacing me or trying to
Right.
mimic me if I was to ask questions to get to that deeper level.
Mhm.
But it's up to the individual to determine where to start. I think the technology probably can grow to be a little bit more of what's the most important thing to you. That's
Mhm.
definitely, it has the capability. The way we do that currently is through me, like through a one-on-one
Right.
conversation to determine that. my philosophy is that all roads lead to Rome. It doesn't really matter where you
Yeah.
start with. For most of us, when we get to our unconscious belief patterns, they're so ingrained and they have a tie to our childhood in some way. And they're not right, wrong, bad, good. They just are, but they're all rooted together. And no matter what you work on, everything will start to shift because it's all based on this unconscious person in your head, this belief pattern in your head, that once we start to connect with that and change it, everything starts to change.
Yeah. So just like, I got a couple of questions, but one, just before I forget, as far as like age, like, is there an age that's like, it works best at this age range, or like, is that something that's been shown, or is it something that's like, okay, we won't work with you if you're too young because the brain hasn't developed enough. You don't know what, like,
that's
what
a great
you're doing
question.
if you don't, you know?
So we have an ethics council that is helping to guide us to answer some of those questions. The cognitive theory would say that your unconscious personality that we are working to identify and connect with probably was framed around ages 7 or 8. So my thought would be is we maybe wouldn't go below ages 7 or 8, but also maybe that's the moment when you have the most ability to make a choice and teach someone at that age. We have clients. I know I use this with my son. My youngest is 12. I find him to be unbelievably open to it, and we use it with sports. And I know one of my colleagues uses it with his children with sports as well. But it all comes back to a self-confidence thought. Right. And it's amazing how a 12-year-old is very attached to, I'm not good enough. And so where did that happen? Theory around 7 or 8, but maybe it was younger. We also have clients in their 70s who are seeing tremendous success with this because we're humans, no matter how old we are, and we're dealing with the same mental processing. We all kind of have the same computers in our head. So learning to understand that really doesn't have an age, but I've seen it successful with 12-year-olds. I'm in my 40s. It's very successful. And I've seen it successful with 70-year-olds. So that's our range, I would say. 12 and above.
And I could see that 7 or 8-year-old, because that's also what I look at and go like, you know, if you talk to a kindergartner or a preschooler and you ask them what they want to be, they're going to just spout off all kinds of crazy stuff because they don't have any clue what it takes to be that.
Or any limits, right? Like,
they're just like, you know, and so, at some point in there, though, before you get to, I've got 2 junior high kids. And so it's like, and they're very much more grounded and very much more, okay, this is life. This is how we interact in our social. This is how all this stuff works. And I'm like, okay, somewhere in that range, that changed. You know, that limitless change to, okay, this is where I fall. This is how things go. And we still try and tell them that, you know, you can still do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. You can do whatever you want. Like, obviously within reason, as far as what your physical capabilities are and that kind of thing. But like, you know, there's still the possibility still out there if you can let your mind go there.
If you can let your mind go there. And I mean, that's so fascinating because the idea is that these personalities, our ability, what we think we're capable of, maybe was formed around that 7 or 8. But I cannot hear any other words in my parents' voice besides you can be and do whatever you want. But I didn't actually believe that. Right. So no one really knows where that came from. And even as parents, we're trying to tell our kids and give them those inputs all the time, but they're still wiring based on all of their exposure. And our kids these days have so much more than we did. You know, I often say, like, you guys just have so many more choices about who you are and what your identity is that it seems really confusing. I didn't have to make those so many choices about my identity when I was a young person. But they have many more influences. So we just really have no idea what's shaping their brains, our brains, but it exists. And so you really can be anything that you want. But I have found, even in my 30s and 40s, having to retrain myself to believe that because consciously I've thought it many times, but somewhere in my unconscious, I was very limited on what I'm capable of,
Right.
what I can do, what's available to me. And that has much more to do with just exposure than
Right.
anything.
Right. And when it comes to, so as an athlete myself and a coach of athletes, like one of the things I can relate to is a couple of years ago, I had an athlete who now she has walked on to a top level Division I school. But I remember specifically, like I can tell you what her face looked like. I can tell you the conversation. 2 years ago, we were at the track and she just wasn't doing well in her workout. And I stopped her and I said, "Okay, what's wrong?" And she looked at me and she started crying. And she was like, "I just don't think I can do it." And I was like, "The workout? Like, what are you talking?" She goes, "No, I don't think I can make it to college and run in college." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And that was, I could tell immediately. I was like, okay, she was already running times that were well, like from a lower level school, she was well qualified to run and compete. And, but somewhere in her subconscious, she had just told herself, "I don't think I'm good enough." And through tears coming down. And I was like, okay, stop the workout. Like it's a whole nother level of issue we've got to deal with. And now she's at her dream school and she's able to walk onto and like, it definitely is there. And sometimes we need that coach or that outside influence. And that's where I think, this technology can come in, because we need that outside influence. Sometimes we're afraid to talk to somebody. And so this is a way that we can basically like almost talk to ourselves, right?
Yeah, that's what I really love about it. And I mean, interesting that example with your athlete. The tears come and it's a release. Like my description of that is it's a release of kind of putting out there what you've been thinking that you don't want to say out loud, right? And it does feel sort of cathartic when you finally say that, but she probably spent so much time thinking that and working against it, which does create conflict. And that is it's the definition of willpower. And that's what we tend to rely on for growth is, I know I have this belief pattern that I can't do it, but I'm going to do it. And it's exhausting. And we do run it out. We kind of lose steam on that. So acknowledging these thoughts, I think, creates space to actually move beyond them and really allowing yourself to acknowledge, I have this unconscious belief pattern. I didn't choose it. And so I'm going to look at it for what it is and practice releasing it, because once you can acknowledge it, then you really can start to diminish its power. But when we let it sort of live in our unconscious, it ends up being the most powerful thing. But we spend so much time resisting it. I do love, especially as a coach myself and like you, a performance athlete, sometimes it's harder to acknowledge, like we think we should have it all figured out. Right. And so, and top tier athletes, like the one you were talking about, she probably thought, I should be past this. Like this can't be the thing holding me back. So saying that out loud to someone, you really have to have a trusting relationship to get to that level of vulnerability. And sometimes, this isn't therapy, it is coaching, but it can be a bridge to that because of where we get. And I think of it as having a coach or a therapist in your pocket, because what you're willing to say in the privacy of just me and my phone, especially for the next generation, they're much more comfortable chatting in their phone than they would being on a conversation like this, right? So allowing for that intimacy and that privacy does create a level of calm and security to get to some of those things that maybe we wouldn't, even in a trusting, private coaching relationship. Sometimes you're really trying to manufacture what's the right thing I should be thinking instead of what's actually there, and then letting that go.
Well, and you said, that it gets you that space to get past it when you acknowledge it and you say, okay, this is, right or wrong. This is what I'm thinking. And like, I need to be able to move past it somehow. But that opens the door to say that, like, we're not at our limit. Like, there's so much more to our unconscious that's out
Mm-hmm.
there. And, I remember my coach in high school used to say, from a physical standpoint, from a runner, I'm a cross country
Mm-hmm.
runner, right? From a physical standpoint, he's like, your body, you're trained, your body will go farther than your mind thinks it will.
Yep.
Your mind's going to shut down first because your mind's going to say, oh, this hurts. Oh, this is painful. Oh, this is like, why are you doing this to me? And he said, you've always got 30% more past that point that you
Mm-hmm.
can give physically. And he's like, you got to get to that point if you want to be truly at that top level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've always kept that, knowing that, like, yes, that's physical body, but that also means like I can push my unconscious further.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's limitless. I mean, we have no idea
Mm-hmm.
how much of our brain really does run on autopilot, on this
Mm-hmm.
unconscious thinking. All we know is that it's necessary.
Yeah.
So we know that our brains absolutely love unconscious thinking because it's efficient, it's easy.
Mm,
It's why we love structure and routine and habits,
right.
because we don't have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
The things that we don't have to think about just happen. And this process is all about understanding, well, what about the things I'm not thinking about, but it's happening and I don't like what's happening?
Yeah.
I don't really like what I'm getting
Yeah.
here. What is driving that?
Yeah.
And that's what we want to help people to uncover. And some of it, we don't like. And so I like
Mm-hmm.
the idea of the privacy of it, because it does take a minute to get comfortable with, wow, that's really what I think. And I just like to offer anyone who's doing this work to lead with compassion and curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
And the first practice is really learning how to examine yourself with non-judgment. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
really is a skill. It is not easy. It is not natural. We're very judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
particularly of ourselves. So if you come across an unconscious thought and you've been a performance athlete your whole life, and then you uncover, I don't think I can do it. And you've been telling your parents you can do it. You've been telling your spouse you can do it. You've been listening to everybody. You've been really building yourself up and leaning into the positive thinking, but you've never really acknowledged that this exists.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're eventually going to get to a limit and feel stuck. And you might feel like that imposter syndrome, for example. It's a great sort of segue as we bring that in. You might think you have imposter syndrome, but it's not so much that, it's that you believe that it's possible, but your unconscious just hasn't caught up and you haven't acknowledged and
Right.
released that belief pattern, which then, of course, feels like imposter syndrome, but that's still surface level compared to what is actually sort of running in the background in your brain, which is saying, I can't, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, well, and it's funny because that belief pattern, and it's something that I remember hearing, and I don't want to say who it was because I can't remember exactly who it was because there's a couple of them that I follow, but one of the top influencers who's financial side of things,
Yeah.
and people were asking me like, how did you get to this point? How did you get to make your millions? How did you da da da? And through the conversation, he was just like, you don't understand. You live in America. There's no reason why anybody in America can't make $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, what? Because I'm not doing that. Like, I'm like, how can you say that? Like, you're on the other side of it. And I caught myself going, wait a minute. Okay. Is it just a mindset? Is it just okay, I haven't taken advantage of the things that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And because I look at it and I go, health wise, okay, well, that's the same thing. Like, there's no
Mm-hmm.
reason people in the US are not healthy. We have all the technology, we have all the knowledge, I mean, you can go anywhere and find healthy recipes, you can find healthy food, like you've got the ability to exercise. And so, I start thinking about it. I'm like, oh, am I telling myself an unconsciously behavior thought pattern of I can only make so much money because that's my family tree, if you will,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean,
And
maybe. That's a good example of understanding where you are and allowing yourself to stair step into the mindset that you want. Because someone
Mhm.
who's struggled with money, who maybe has like a negative balance in their bank account today, and you're like, there's no reason you can't make $1 million. Getting their mind to shift like that from I'm broke to I'm a millionaire
Right.
is a big leap,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what is the next believable thing that you don't yet believe, but you want to? And
Hmm.
I think that's where this becomes really powerful, because I agree with you. I think there's no reason any of us who have such access to the ability to be, do, sell, experience anything we want, we can all make $1 million. But why aren't we?
Right.
For one, like, you might not value it, and that might not actually be your goal.
Sure.
For two, maybe you just really don't know how. But what are those limiting beliefs? Because it might not just be, I don't think it's possible, but it's like, well, I don't really know how, or I can't even make 200,000, let alone 1 million.
Right.
And then we work into that, right? But
Yeah.
that's the idea of releasing the unconscious, which probably sounds more, not like I can't make $1 million, but it's an identity
Hmm.
that is what it is. Like
Right.
you said, my family tree, we are solid middle class or whatever it is. I have enough. I have plenty. There might be a thought pattern there that almost is fearful of
Hmm.
making too much money. Like, I can't think of like something on the tip of my tongue, but it's like, be careful. We have plenty. Don't be
Right.
greedy. Don't be
Right.
like those kinds
Yeah.
of things start to come out. It's like, oh, has nothing to do with my belief about my ability to make money. It's actually my thought about money in general, and that
Right.
might make me a bad person. And that's the kind
Right.
of thing we can then like notice. It can be very complicated.
Yeah.
So getting to that, if that was an issue to work with a life coach, for example, it might take 6 or 7 sessions to get to something like that, versus using technology to start to really validate what you're thinking can just expedite it
Yeah.
significantly, and not only undo your unconscious mindset, but help you to determine what you truly even want.
Right.
I always find that, especially the finance discussions, are always interesting, because sometimes that's just as much of an input as anything else. People say you should want
Hmm.
to make $1 million, and then,
Right.
well, do you? I don't
Right.
know if that's good for you
Yeah.
or me. Right?
That's a whole nother question. And it's interesting because I've got a couple of new clients that I'm working with this afternoon, and I was on my run this morning and I was going through, okay, what are the things I'm going to ask? Because I know a little bit about their situation so far. And it comes down to like, okay, well, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Because, and the thing that kept hitting me was like, as a coach, I can coach you, especially on the athletic side for me, like I can coach you to like any kind of physical activity or, effort or performance level if you want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like leading a horse to water. Like I can get you there, but if you don't want it, you don't want it. And that's fine, you know?
Yeah. And my sort of framework that I work within is that everything that we want is actually tied to an emotional experience. But our
Hmm.
emotional experiences are driven by our thought patterns, by our mindsets.
Right.
And so when I ask somebody, so for example, like they come to you and they say, I want to run a marathon, but they're not doing anything to get there.
Right.
And it's like, well, why? I always say it, why you want it matters so much more than
Hmm.
what you're doing or what you're doing to get there. And if
Right.
why you want it doesn't match, like it's not compelling to you, you're not going to do it. So why do you want to run a marathon? Well, I just feel like it's what you're supposed to do when you turn 35. Okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
that's not going to get you there, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it seems like it
I've heard
doesn't
that. That's why I'm
matter to
laughing. I've
you,
heard that.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, let's just dig a little deeper. Why do you really want it? Or what do you really want? Because them
Yeah.
even showing up to do something to improve their fitness, it still is tied to an emotion. I want to
Yeah.
feel accomplished. I want to feel like I belong. I want to feel like I fit in. Okay, is this truly going to get you there? If you are someone who finished a marathon by the time you turn 35, will you feel like you belong? And if so,
Hmm.
why? That has much more to do with their mindset shift,
Yeah.
which still can happen through the process. And that's what I think is so beautiful. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, but if you want to run a marathon to get to this identity of I care about myself, I prioritize my health,
Hmm.
I've arrived, I'm successful, then you practice believing that as you're doing the work, and we're pairing mindset with action,
Hmm.
that I think then creates true
Right.
personal transformation, because you actually, to become a person who does something like, elite fitness, completing it doesn't change your thoughts about yourself. Those
Right.
thoughts change over time. And when you can actually acknowledge that and connect with that process, I think it's much more sticky, right?
Mm.
We
Yep.
stick with it
Yep.
because we've done that actual work. It didn't just happen to us.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, I can attest to it for me personally. I've run races that I was like gearing up for, and like you run it, and then it's like, okay, well, that didn't really change me. I achieved my goal, but I'm still the same person, except
Yeah.
that now I just have this extra little, check mark on my, it's like, okay, now what, in a lot of it's interesting because a lot of times when you get into a community of, performance like that, the people in the community are like, oh, okay, well, hey, what are you going to do next? And it's like, you can't celebrate or, too much, because it's like, oh, and I think we've built that a little bit in our society, just with the top sports levels and all the different, because you hear them, they win a championship, oh, we're going to go try and win it again next year. It's like, sometimes for us, when we're not doing those high level performances, we just need to have the mindset of like, we achieved something, we need to enjoy it and be okay with it, and like sit and relax for a minute.
Yeah. And think about that process. If you just pull back and watch that as an observer, you're so proud and
Mm-hmm.
achieved something. You know, you won the championship, you finished the half marathon, and everyone around you is asking, now what?
Yeah.
Which, of course, is going to fuel a mindset and a belief pattern of, I'm not enough. No matter
Yep.
what I do, it's
Yep.
never enough. And so you see these people, and for some people, then it just fuels the motivation,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
that's even real, to keep going. But
Mm-hmm.
that can lead to burnout because they're not really chasing the accomplishment. They're hiding from this mindset of, I'm not enough.
Right.
And as long as I keep going, then I'm enough. And so what do we do when it is time to sort of hang up the shoes? Like, our bodies no longer, we maybe don't need to run 26.2 miles
Right.
every year for the rest of our lives to
Yeah.
prove that we're healthy and
Yeah.
worthy. What
Yeah.
is that then? And I really believe that's where this work comes together, because there's nothing more like aching to me than to help someone through a wellness transformation and for them to think that, oh, okay, I got it. I lost 100 pounds. I ran the marathon. I did whatever. And so now I'm done. And then they go back. They
Right.
go back to old habits and old patterns, because if the mindset shift isn't there to
Mm-hmm.
adopt a new way of being, then
Yeah.
it was only ever activity.
Yeah.
That's why sort of our wellness cycle ends up being exactly that, because things are temporary. We
Right.
adopt, I can sort of grit and bear it through this, but who are you really becoming by achieving the championship or by finishing the marathon? Are you now someone who no longer thinks that there's not enough time? And so
Yeah.
you now, like, you did it for 6 months to get to this point. Did you become someone who always has time for yourself, always
Mm-hmm.
has time for wellness, always has time for, exercise and movement? Or were you saying, like, I love this one when people, and I just coached someone on it this week, but it's like, well, I'm running a half marathon. So basically my family agrees that my health is a priority for this period of time. But what about when the half marathon isn't the goal?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then if someone needs your attention and it's between that and you going for your run, where does it live on the priority list? And that's how we end up just not doing it. And we
Yeah.
think it's the goal that gets us to where we need to be, but it really was a belief pattern about it, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was a connection to that and sort of an agreement that, well, this matters for now, but once
For
that's
now.
not
Yeah.
the goal, it doesn't matter as much. And
Yeah.
when it comes to, our relationship with our body and our health, it's a forever thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Yeah.
it's the vessel we have to live our whole life. So if it's always on the back burner, why is that? That has everything to do with your thoughts about it and
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with the circumstances of your life. And I think that's where these mindset shifting transformations become so powerful no matter what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
So it really
Well,
builds
and
that connection.
I think that in the health piece for your individual body, but also in your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things I always tell people, um, when I start helping them with their nutrition or their health, or and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, well, like you said, how am I going to fit this in? Where do I find the time? Where do I? And like, okay, well, the one thing that I hear almost across the board for people on their deathbed when they're, being asked, like, okay, how was your life? Like, do you have any regrets? Yeah, I regret spending so much time at work.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, and so like, I understand that there's pressures, and I understand that, everybody's job has requirements and you have to do these things. But I also know that if you're healthy and you're taking care of your brain, you're taking care of your body, you're going to be more productive when you are at work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so taking that time, and in your relationships are going to be better if you're taking that time with your relationships. And so I think
Yeah.
taking that time is so much more important than people realize in the moment.
And finding that balance for you and what that actually means. I
Mm-hmm.
think on our, like, it's such a good example. Oh, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time at work. Well, yes, but we go to work so that we can get paid, and
Right.
our want money to live our lives. And so the answer for most of us in midlife probably isn't to stop working. It really
Right.
is to figure out where that emphasis is and making sure that our value exchange always feels
Mm-hmm.
pretty good. So, what am I trading my time for? What am I trading my energy for? What am I
Right.
trading my stress for? And do I like my reason for that or not? And that always comes back to your own mindset, and you get to
Mm-hmm.
decide what that is completely.
Yeah.
But I mean, I see that happen with most of my clients as they come to me or this work or self-help or something, which yours probably do too, is it's like I've kind of done
Mm-hmm.
everything I'm supposed to do at this phase in my life, and I don't feel great. I
Yeah.
don't feel accomplished. I feel stuck. There's got to be something more. And I mean, I've been there. We cycle through it, but answering that question is an individual one. And the idea of what you have now not being enough has something to do with your unconscious belief patterns. So kind of creating that plan for yourself, whether it's a wellness endeavor or your
Mm-hmm.
relationship or any of that, the majority of the work is internal. And I don't
Right.
think that's something that by and large our society has understands or we've taught to ourselves and each other, is that
Mm-hmm.
to improve your relationships with others, yourself, and your life, you really need to change the way that you think about all of it. And I think that's
Right.
just a fairly new practice, even in the mindfulness community. And the example of sort of meditation and then real life is a classic one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty good at calming my mind and being centered when I'm in the yoga room or on this retreat or
Right.
on vacation. But what about the days when I'm at work? How do I go to work
Yeah.
and come home and not be completely burnt out
Yeah.
so that I can actually spend time with my family? And I truly believe that has much more to do with the way that we think and then approach our lives than it does with the circumstances of them.
Well, and when you said that, I immediately thought to, the very common phrase of when you come back from vacation, it's like, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation. Like,
Right.
and it's like, oh, because, and I have gotten away from that standpoint because I've approached my time off
Hmm.
in a different manner. And I go much more intentionally into, okay, I'm not going to use my phone. I'm going to spend quality time with
Hmm.
family. I'm going to like just relax. We're not going to have the TV on. We're not going to do these things. Like, and I know a lot of people, it's like, okay, well, we're going to go cram all this fun stuff into a week to make up for the year that we didn't do any fun stuff because we've been so busy prioritizing da 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 and all the days that we have. And then, of course, you're going to need a vacation from your vacation because you didn't go into it with the mindset of this is my relaxing time. You knew
Hmm.
into it the mindset of let's go cram as much fun stuff as we can into a week.
Right. This is our quality time. This is when we get to hang out together.
Yeah.
Um, I love that. And what you said was I've adopted these practices to allow myself to have quality time amidst my day-to-day activities,
Mhm.
right? No phones, no screen time. Let's all sit around and talk together. Well, I love that. And I love that that works for you. And I think that's what we are presented with often
Yeah.
in our worlds. Just have, you know, Wellness Wednesdays where there's no
Mhm.
screen time and you all spend time together and really be present for your life. Have
Yeah.
conversations around the dinner table. I love all of that, but they're very action focused. They're very focused
Mhm.
on do this to get what you want.
Right.
And that might not match your individual mindset around it.
Mhm.
And so when you're doing those kinds of things, or if someone's trying to adopt practices like that, my first question always is why? What
Mhm.
do you think is going to be different? Why does this matter to you? Why would you want to turn off all the electronics in your house? Um, and it's interesting because in sort of the coaching industry, there's a lot of suggestions about
Oh
what we
yeah.
should be doing to improve our lives. And
Mhm.
it can be really confusing, not unlike the financial conversation. Like, of course
Yep.
you can make $1 million, but why would you want that? And if it's not true for you, then you're sort of
Mhm.
chasing something else yet again.
Right.
Um, so maybe screen time for some families isn't the worst of it. And maybe it's a stair step into what they're actually trying to achieve, which is I just want time together. And if I
Yeah.
try to get the kids to play a board game, they're out, like they're
Mhm.
completely gone. But if I sit down and play PlayStation with my kid for 20 minutes, he actually starts to talk to me. And what I
Right.
want is a conversation. Do I really care
Right.
how we get there? Maybe, maybe not, but that's an individual thing,
Mhm.
which I think is what the mindset of it, that component, why that's so powerful, because we can adopt a million healthy practices, but if they're not addressing your true desire, it
Yeah.
won't actually achieve what you want. Because, like I said, everything we do, we're really just chasing a feeling.
Right.
And when we
Right.
know what that is, then we can actually sort of personalize and curate whatever those practices are that we want
Yeah.
to do to get there.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I fully agree with you because I know people with, you know, with struggles with their teens, and it's like, okay, well, have you tried this? Like, go to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
If they gravitate to this, and it could be frustrating to you, and it could be something that like you have no desire to be involved in or what, but like you said, sometimes if you go there for 20 minutes, all of a sudden they'll open up and start talking, and you're like, oh, wow, okay. That's what I really wanted.
That's what I really wanted. And when you can be conscious of that yourself, that's where it feels really freeing and powerful.
Mhm.
Do I want to play PlayStation or Fortnite? No.
Mhm.
But do I want to spend quality time with my adolescent? Yeah. And this is what they're doing. So,
Right.
am I willing to sort of accept that discomfort to get what I truly desire? Yeah. It's
Mhm.
not unlike going to work. Do I want to go sit in
Right.
front of a computer all day? Not particularly, but do I want to pay my mortgage and have a
Right.
healthy household and be able to clothe my kids and go on that vacation at some point? Yeah. So
Yep.
for about 40 hours a week, I'll trade my time for
Right.
that.
Right. And it is, and it's a mindset shift. It's a shift of, you know, whether it's, this is the way we did it when I was a kid. And so I'm going to just repeat that, even though, like you mentioned before, like there's so many more challenges and things out there that the
Yeah.
kids are dealing with now. Um, but also then you've got the different personalities, obviously, of the
Mhm.
generational things. Um, and, and it is a mindset shift to say like, okay, well, what was right for me may not be right for them. And I have to allow myself to understand that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and relationships are so complicated that way, right? But the
Mhm.
the best thing I've learned for myself and I give to my clients is it's like it really is all about you.
Mhm.
At the beginning and end of the day, the best relationships are cultivated by people who understand themselves and stop attaching other people's behavior to their emotional experience. We let others be who they are and do what they need and love them unconditionally by sort of not resisting that, but then understanding what do I truly want in
Right.
this relationship.
Right.
And I think it's so powerful. And I do I'll be interested to see how we can help to shift the younger generation, because that input, those options that are available in social media of what's good, what's right, what's
Hmm.
successful, there's just so many options
Yeah.
available. And a lot of times it's just an endless pit of, well, I'm not like that, so I'm not enough. And helping
Right.
people to understand that it's all internal and
Hmm.
that you get to decide. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it feels better. Even just the simple example that I gave of work. If you're going to work every day saying, ugh, I wish I didn't have to, I just want to be on a beach, which
Right.
same,
Right.
same.
Exactly.
Um, but that makes me feel terrible. And if I think, I mean, I don't, do I want to be in front of a computer every day? No, but am I willing to because I like what I get out of it?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
it just feels different, and it
Yeah.
reduces my blood pressure, reduces my stress. It allows me then when I get to vacation or even evening time and driving the kids to and from sports, I'm not burnt by the end of the day because I haven't been listening to this negative loop all day
Right.
of, I wish I wasn't here. I wish I wasn't here.
Yeah.
Right. And that
Yeah.
is available to us so frequently that we can do it on our own. And I think the biggest challenge is knowing that it's there and that it's optional and
Right.
kind of where to start. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about this work.
Yeah. So that's a great segue because I'm running out of time and I want to be respectful of your time. So tell us about like MetaBrain Labs. How can people get involved?
Yeah.
How can they follow, get in touch, all those types of things?
So my name is Kim and I run MetaBrain Self, and that is METBRAINSELF.com.
Okay.
MetaBrain Self. And the easiest way to get in touch is to go to the website. You can ask us questions on the website. You can email me. You can email our team. I think the best way to get engaged is we kind of have a starter pack where you get the EEG headset, you get an hour with me, and you get access to the app technology to sort of get to launch you into this work.
Hmm.
And then you can continue to work with us in a bunch of different ways. We have group settings and we have one-on-one settings if you want that
Cool.
coaching support, but that's
Yeah.
really the best way to get started.
Awesome. Well, I will link that in the show notes so it's
Okay.
easy for people to get to. And I want to thank you so much because I do see that mindset is something that we're starting to realize can make big changes in people's lives, both positive and negative. And hopefully people can go towards the positive side of it. And to have something out there to help people that don't know where to go for help,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe can't find that person individually that can help them. I think it's amazing and it's great. And so thank you for what you're doing. And um, if there's anything that I can do to help support you, let me know. Be happy to do so.
Thank you.
So,
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
of course.